After showing up at the Orion Group's headquarters unannounced, Kevin demanded to see the company president. The receptionist was rude to him as she informed him that there was no way he would be able to meet with the president today, after which she called over a handful of security guards. After ignoring their warnings to leave, the lead security guard took a step toward Kevin, and Kevin instantly caught the guard's arm, seemingly dislocating it. Kevin roughed up a few of the other security guards before the company president suddenly appeared in the lobby. The onlookers whispered among themselves, but none of them dared to raise their voices. They were all surprised to see the company president right in front of them. Although the Orion Group had many executives, the president was undoubtedly the biggest shareholder and the nominal CEO of the company. He was someone who could shake the entirety of Washington, D.C. with just a stomp of his foot. Who would dare to be impudent in front of him? "Sir, this man barged in and said that he wanted to see you. I have already told him several times that he can't meet you without an appointment, but he didn't listen to me and even attacked our security personnel," the receptionist quickly explained. "Who are you?" The man narrowed his eyes and stared at Kevin. He did not pay much attention to what the receptionist had just said. He had a meeting earlier this morning and was delayed. That was why he had only just come to the company headquarters so late. He did not expect to encounter such chaos in the lobby when he arrived. The most amazing thing was that he had actually felt that Kevin looked very familiar, but he was also somewhat certain that he hadn't seen this person before in Washington, D.C. "It's been a long time since we last met, sir. You look well," Kevin said as he slowly let go of the security guard's wrist and pushed him away. "Have we met before?" the president asked unhurriedly. "It seems that you've forgotten about me, but I'm sure you remember the investment I made in your company's stock 4 years ago." The smile on Kevin's face did not diminish in the slightest. "Oh, you are Kevin Williams." Only then did the man come to a realization. He might have forgotten quite a few things over the years, but he would never forget the fact that this young man's investment had helped him quite a bit. 4 years ago, the Orion Group was far from being as powerful as it was now. At that time, they had many competitors. The company president was also deeply invested at that time. Like many others, he had lost a lot of money. The Orion Group was even on the verge of bankruptcy, and they owed a lot of foreign debts. Just when he was at his wit's end, a young man suddenly appeared. He paid $8 million to buy 20% of the company's shares. Of course, that man was Kevin. In the eyes of the outsiders at that time, Kevin was providing charity, and what was widely perceived to be reckless charity at that. But little did anyone know that was the moment the Orion Group's meteoric rise began. "Mr. Williams, it's been so many years since we last saw each other. When did you get to Washington? Why didn't you reach out to me in advance? It would have been good to know you were coming so we could have prepared." A thick smile quickly emerged on the man's face. He quickly walked forward and gave Kevin a firm handshake with one hand while he patted his shoulder with the other. "I just arrived in D.C. not long ago," Kevin also said with a smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your men here," he added, gesturing towards the security guards on the floor around him. "It doesn't matter. They'll be fine. They shouldn't have made assumptions," the president said as he turned around and said sternly to the security guards, "Listen up. This is the second largest shareholder of our company, Mr. Kevin Williams. Next time, at least ask the name of a visitor before you try to kick them out. Now get lost." This scene stunned the surrounding people, especially the receptionist, whose face was now dark red. She was so scared that all she could do was stare at Kevin in a daze. Who would have thought that an unknown young man who walked into the company making demands would turn out to be the second largest shareholder of the Orion Group? "There's no need to deal with this seriously, sir. They were only doing their jobs. They wouldn't have done anything if the receptionist didn't call them over," Kevin said as he gestured toward the receptionist indifferently. The president's face quickly darkened, and his narrowed eyes revealed a biting chill. Everything that had been assured by the people gathered in the lobby had been shattered so quickly. An unknown visitor turned out to be the second largest shareholder in the Orion Group. This kind of turnaround was quite unexpected. Very few of the people present would have even known that someone like Kevin existed. In an instant, all of the people in the lobby who had been ridiculing Kevin immediately changed their opinions of him. All kinds of flattering words were thrown about, but Kevin didn't even look at them or pay any attention to them. Or it could be say that what unfolded was actually very much within his expectations. He had encountered too many similar incidents in the past. "I will personally pay whatever it costs to take care of the men I injured here today. Please just have any hospital bills sent over to me," Kevin said in a low voice as he patted the president's shoulder. The receptionist still just stood there with a horrified expression on her face. She couldn't believe that she had been so short-sighted. It was her sense of superiority that had come back to bite her today. She had offended the second largest shareholder of the entire company, and the consequences that she would have to face next were no doubt going to be beyond what she could imagine. "Sir, I was wrong. Please don't fire me," the receptionist pleaded as she ran up to Kevin in a hurry. She looked like she was about to get down on her knees and beg. "It was all my fault. I shouldn't have made any assumptions about you. Please don't have me fired. I'm willing to do anything to make it right," she said. "It's not up to me. I'll let the president take care of it as he sees fit," Kevin said as he turned around and didn't even look at her. "Pack up your things. You're fired," the president said without hesitation. To be able to make the Orion Group rise to the level it had reached today, the president had to maintain an unemotional temperament. Firing an employee was not a big deal to him, and especially if the employee was a lowly receptionist who had offended his financial backer. "Mr. Williams, follow me. I have some of the best coffee in the world in my office. We haven't seen each other for many years, so we have to go catch up," he said. After the president finished dealing with the receptionist, his expression changed immediately. He turned around and spoke to Kevin with a huge smile on his face. He put his arm around Kevin's shoulder and they quickly walked upstairs. Everyone in the lobby was left dumbfounded. "Clear my schedule. I want to spend some time with Mr. Williams," the president said as he paused by his assistant's desk and was about to walk into his office. "Sir, I can't do that. There's an emergency meeting starting soon that needs you to be present. There is also a contract review meeting that you'll need to attend after that," his assistant replied immediately. "Nonsense. Push them back for me," he started to say. "Hey, you don't have to do this just on my account. If you have things to do, you can go take care of them first. I'll just wait for you in your office," Kevin said. It was true that he was the second biggest shareholder in the company, but he also understood the demands of running a large company like the Orion Group. If he suddenly appeared and affected the internal operations of the company, many employees might look at him differently. "Mr. Williams, the president started to say. "Please, I insist." Kevin forcefully interrupted him, but still spoke in a very considerate manner. Then I'll settle this matter as soon as possible. After that, I'll come back and spend some time with you," the president replied with some embarrassment and asked his assistant to help Kevin get comfortable in his office. After that, the president walked straight to the conference room. Following the assistant's lead, Kevin walked into the president's office. The moment he entered, Kevin was stunned. This was an office? The floor was paved with high-level marble, and it was polished until it was smooth as a mirror. If one stepped on it, he would be able to see a footprint clearly. There were several bottles of expensive wine and liquor covering the shelves next to them. The sofa and coffee table were all clearly the highest quality. "Mr. Williams, please make yourself comfortable. The president has many things to deal with. It might take quite a long time. Can I get you anything while you wait?" the assistant said respectfully to Kevin with a smile. "I'm fine. Go ahead and do your work. I'll just catch up on emails here for a while," Kevin said as he sat on the sofa and took out his phone. After giving Kevin a deep look, the assistant nodded and slowly left the office. In the hospital in Chicago, the surgery that had lasted for a few hours had finally ended. Lily was rolled out of the operating room by a group of nurses. The people who had been waiting in the hallway for a long time immediately surrounded her. "Doctor, may I ask how she's doing?" Gilbert Rhodes anxiously grabbed a nurse's arm and asked.
"Please, tell me she's gonna be okay."
Dalton Steele grabbed the coat of one of the doctors and pressed him against the wall, aggressively demanding an answer. "Please calm down. The patient's surgery was successful. It's just that the wound from the bullet was very close to the heart, causing her to lose a lot of blood. That's why she'll need quite a bit of time to recuperate," the doctor said, somewhat shocked by Dalton's aggressive stance.
"Really?"
Dalton said as he let out a long sigh of relief. "Yes, really." The doctor saw that he was in a daze and quickly slipped out of his grasp. He then gestured to his colleagues behind him, indicating that they should leave quickly. It was clear that these people were really not to be trifled with. "Please make way. The patient needs to rest. We need to send her to a room now," the nurse said, raising her voice a little.
Okay. Let's move aside," Dalton said.
As long as Lily was fine, he could give Kevin a positive report. "Stop!" a figure suddenly said from the end of the hallway. Dalton frowned. Everyone heard the voice and saw Officer Emmett walking over with a group of people behind her.
"What are you doing here?"
Dalton said as he took a few steps forward and protected everyone behind him. Officer Emmett first looked at Lily, who was lying on the hospital gurney. Then Officer Emmett shifted her gaze to Dalton. These two people could be said to be old enemies with a deep hatred for one another. Just from the biting cold look in Dalton Steele's eyes at the moment, anyone could see it. The atmosphere in the hallway went from being dangerous to being terrifying. If Officer Emmett wasn't wearing her uniform, Dalton would have loved the opportunity to shout her down right then and there. There have been a few incidents of violent attacks in Chicago recently. They are basically all related to Lily. We are going to need a statement, Officer Emmett said without any change in her expression. She clearly did not take Dalton Steele seriously.
"No way. Lily needs to recover. I think you are clearly just here to try to cause trouble."
Dalton roared as he clenched his fists, his chest heaving up and down. "Dalton, get out of my way. Otherwise, I'll take you into custody and charge you with obstruction of justice," Officer Emmett said with an annoyed sigh and a slight frown. Regardless, Lily could not really be expected to give a statement in her current condition. Besides, Dalton Steele was not the only one who felt that Officer Emmett was here to cause trouble. Even Emo Squire and Gilbert Rhodes thought that that was her intention. However, they were different from Dalton. Emo and Gilbert were serious businessmen. They didn't have Dalton's background and reputation for using his muscles before his brains. Lily had just been wheeled out of the operating room when Gilbert Rhodes, Dalton Steele, and the others immediately surrounded the doctors and nurses. One of the doctors informed them that the gunshot had been very close to Lily's heart and she had lost a lot of blood, but that she was going to be fine with enough time to recover. As Dalton sighed in relief, a voice sounded from the other end of the hallway. Dalton and the others looked up to see Officer Emmett striding toward them. Officer Emmett, disregarding Dalton's anger, informed him of recent violent attacks linked to Lily and the need for her statement. Despite Dalton's resistance, she threatened arrest for obstruction.
"I'm standing right here. Why don't you try to handcuff me?"
Dalton said, refusing to take a step back. He even took the initiative to stretch out his hands in front of her. He looked at Officer Emmett with a cold glare. "Get him out of our way." Officer Emmett did not want to be outdone and immediately gave the order to the officer standing behind her. However, none of them dared to step forward or even make a move. As the saying goes, a strong tree cast a long shadow. In Chicago, anyone who had ever heard of Dalton Steele must be a complete fool. They were only low-ranking officers. In the eyes of people like them, anyone among them who would dare to make a move on Dalton Steele would either be crazy or stupid. "I asked you to get him out of our way. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me?" Officer Emmett's face turned even uglier as she confronted the officers behind her. She turned around and scolded her colleagues impatiently. I think what Mr. Steele said makes sense. She just came out of surgery. It's probably best if we let her recover for a while before getting a statement." One of them finally bit the bullet and stammered. Another one of the officers spoke up, saying, "How about we leave 2 people behind to observe her condition? The rest of us can return to our work, and when she's awake and ready to speak, we will return." "What did you say?" Officer Emmett's eyes were filled with coldness. Dalton snorted disdainfully and said,
"It seems like there are some smart people among you after all. Since that's the case, I won't make things difficult for you today. Hurry up and get out of here. Don't delay the patient's recovery any longer. If anything happens to her because you got in the way of her recuperation, I can guarantee that none of you will even live long enough to regret it." "You," Officer Emmett started to say. "Officer Emmett, I think you guys should get going." Emo Squire walked out in front of Dalton quickly and interrupted Officer Emmett. "Why don't I call your superior and ask if he has anything to say on the matter?" Officer Emmett, let's go," another officer said in a low voice. They vaguely knew that Officer Emmett's background was not exactly ordinary, but even still, they were surprised that she had so much confidence in a situation like this. At this moment, they were facing almost all of the most powerful people in Chicago. If they really pissed off these powerful people, Officer Emmett might not receive too much punishment given her rank, but the rest of them might not be so lucky. In the end, someone would need to take the blame. "Leave 2 people behind here in the hospital to observe Lily's every move closely. The rest of you follow me," Officer Emmett finally said as she glared at Dalton Steele fiercely. Actually, she really came today to see if Lily was dead. Or rather, she wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to have a good talk with Kevin. She assumed he, being the devoted husband, would be by Lily's bedside. But the fact was that neither of those possibilities had come true. Only the 2 of them knew about the matter between her and Kevin. As for whether there was still a possibility of redemption, Officer Emmett was not very clear. In the president's office of the Orion Group's D.C. headquarters, Kevin crossed his legs and placed them up on the coffee table. He gently swirled the wine glass in his hand. It was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the president finally returned to his office. "Ah, Mr. Williams, you have good taste. You have found one of the finest bottles of wine I have here," he remarked as he walked over to Kevin and sat down with a smile on his face. "Please forgive me for taking so long. I am too busy these days. I didn't mean to give you the cold shoulder," he added. "Oh, don't be too harsh on yourself. I've been quite comfortable here waiting for you. I was able to catch up on some things and now I'm just enjoying some wine." Kevin smiled as he raised his glass slightly. "So you've been out in the Midwest for a while now, haven't you? What brings you to D.C. now?" the president asked as he pushed his glasses up on the bridge of his nose. The smile on his face did not disappear as he asked Kevin the question. "I have long heard that this city is ripe with opportunity. Of course, I had to take advantage of the fact that I'm still young enough to come and challenge it." Kevin licked his lips. After hesitating for a moment, he placed the wine glass on the coffee table. "But I have to say, I also have something that I need your help with." "What is it?" the president asked. He was also a man of character and he would do whatever he could to help, even though he did not have much of a relationship with Kevin up to this point. Still, he had always remembered the kindness Kevin had shown him years ago. The Orion Group was his life, and he had paid a great price with his time and energy to make it what it was today. "I wonder how familiar you are with the Kessler Corporation?" Kevin asked as he took a sip of his wine. The president froze. At their level, there were many things that did not need to be explained clearly. When discussing such matters, only a few words were needed to understand exactly what was going on. "Mr. Williams, may I ask why you would like to know this?" the president asked softly. The Kessler Corporation was named after Raymond Kessler. It was one of the core business interests of the Kessler family and was one of the largest energy companies in the country. As such, the Orion Group and the Kessler Corporation were rivals. But due to their different approaches, the Orion Group didn't necessarily compete directly with them. There are some things that must be resolved. As the second largest shareholder of this company, in the past few years I have not done anything useful with my status within the Orion Group. Since I'm here in D.C., I thought that now might be the right time to change that," Kevin said as he slowly poured a glass of wine for the president. There was a meaningful smile on his face.
Hearing this, the president did not exactly show a happy expression. Instead, his face became even more serious.
Mr. Williams, do you know who is standing behind the Kessler Corporation?
He asked slowly as he blinked a few times.
Yes, I do. The Kessler family, of course, Kevin replied indifferently. And do you know what the Kessler family does? He asked hesitatingly.
Without waiting for Kevin to answer, the president continued to narrate.
I know that you've just arrived here in D.C., so I don't know how familiar you are with the current situation. I know you are young and ambitious and you are full of energy with everything you set your mind to, but this approach often leaves one vulnerable to making avoidable mistakes. You should know that the Kessler family has as many government connections as anyone in the city. I'm a businessman and I try not to have much to do with politics if I can help it. But I can tell you that the Kessler family's business interests have been developing rapidly in the past few years. Moreover, their government background means that many things are more convenient for them to access. You understand what I'm telling you?
Kevin was not in a hurry to answer. The president's words weren't obvious, but Kevin understood what he meant. I understand what you're saying, but I've already formed a bit of a grudge with the Kessler family. I'll be honest with you. It seems unlikely that it can end well, Kevin said firmly. At the same time, he tightened his grip on the wine glass.
But the Kessler family is not an ordinary family. If you want to get rid of them, you'll have to make a long-term plan.
The president frowned and said. He wanted to say something else, but he stopped himself. The Kessler Corporation could very well be considered the biggest long-term competitor of the Orion Group. If the president could really find a way to undermine the Kessler Corporation, the Orion Group would definitely stand to benefit long into the future. He had always wanted to find a way to do something like this, but he had never had the chance. In fact, he had already received the news about Kevin coming to Washington, D.C. The events surrounding the Herbalist Society's preliminary round and the series of explosions that rocked the arena in the next round had spread like wildfire in Washington. The president was not the kind of person who would ignore what was happening right outside his window. He obviously had his own information network to be able to become as influential in Washington as he now was. However, many things could not be said directly or let be exposed on the surface. Even though he knew all about it, he still had to act like he did not know anything. Knowing something but not necessarily acting on that knowledge immediately was the attitude that any smart person should have. Kevin leaned forward and said, I believe that given the position you have occupied here in Washington for so many years, you must have several channels at your disposal. You should have more than enough resources at your disposal to crush the Kessler Corporation. Isn't that right? Hearing this, a meaningful smile appeared on the president's face. He didn't outwardly agree with Kevin's words, but he also didn't refute them. Most of the time, this kind of attitude was the most unpredictable.
If you can solve the concerns with the government, I am very willing to have this fight alongside you. So what if you stir up a storm here in D.C.?
The president asked. Don't worry, the problems in the government can be naturally solved for us. Also, on the business side, we will not be fighting alone. The smile on Kevin's face gradually spread. The president suddenly had a bad feeling. He felt that he had stepped aboard Kevin's pirate ship and now there was no easy way off. It was after 5 o'clock in the afternoon when Kevin finally left the Orion Group headquarters. As he was leaving, he passed on the president's request to treat him to a meal. Walking the streets of D.C., Kevin looked all around him at the bustling city. His mood was many times better than the last time he was in this situation. Although it had not been long, he felt as if everything had changed. As long as he took the first step carefully, he was confident that what would appear in front of him would be a wide and smooth road to success. Unknowingly, Kevin suddenly found himself on a dark side street with no one else around. Not even a minute later, he noticed 4 or 5 men following him. He turned a corner into an alley, but when they followed, Kevin was nowhere to be seen.
Where is he? Where did he go?
One of them asked.
I clearly saw him turn this corner just now. How did he suddenly disappear? There's no other way out of here, another said. Oh no, let's go. We've been exposed, a third said worriedly.
In an instant, they all reacted. Immediately, they quickly turned around and tried to escape. Since you're already here, why don't you stay a while?
There's no need to leave in such a hurry." Kevin's voice suddenly sounded in the dark alley. The men immediately stopped moving and vigilantly looked around with their backs against each other. A few seconds later, Kevin slowly walked out of the shadows and smiled as he swept his gaze over them. "Where did you come from? The Kessler family by way of the secluded valley?" Kevin crossed his arms in front of his chest and asked slowly. What? No, we were just passing by. We don't want any trouble with you," one of them answered in a panic. Of course, Kevin didn't believe him for a second. From the moment he stepped foot out of the Orion Group headquarters, he immediately felt that someone was following him. However, he didn't want to react too quickly because he wanted to see if there was anyone following the people who were following him. "You've been following me for quite a while, and now you just happened to walk into a remote alley? Do you think I was born yesterday?" Kevin said as he shook his head lightly. "I'll give you one last chance. Tell me who is behind this, and I'll spare your lives. We're all just doing our jobs. There's no need to spill any blood here today. Besides, this is a private matter between me and your boss. You don't need to get personally involved in this. You will have lost your lives in vain. Why not just tell me what I need to know and we can all leave here peacefully?" By this point, Kevin had become a king of verbal attack, so his gentle demeanor stunned the group of men. Having a silver tongue is sometimes just as important as having thousands of soldiers standing behind you. How do we know we can trust you?" one of them said out of the blue. As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized that he shouldn't have spoken up. He immediately felt the urge to slap himself across the face. "Well, how much is your boss paying you? I'd be willing to offer you each $500,000. Kevin spread out his hands and said with a faint smile. Kevin knew that loyalty usually was given to the man with the biggest wallet. After leaving the Orion Group headquarters, Kevin wandered the streets of Washington, D.C. with a newfound sense of security. He soon had the feeling that someone was following him. He led his pursuers down a dark alley and then emerged from the shadows to corner them. Despite their insistence that they were just passing by, Kevin assumed that they must have been sent by the Kessler family. As such, Kevin offered them $500,000 each to tell him who had sent them and to turn on the Kesslers to help him instead. "Are you serious?" one of them asked, shocked by the sum of money Kevin was offering. For ordinary people, it would take years or even decades to earn that much money. They would be able to leave DC and go someplace where no one knew them. They could start a whole new life and live peacefully. Of course it's true. As long as you are willing to work with me as a friend, I can guarantee you financial security and safety. This can be a win-win situation. Kevin was like the leader of a marketing company. He gave them assurances with extreme confidence. When they heard what Kevin said, they were all clearly interested. What Kevin said was the promise of the life they had always dreamed of. Who would want to fight and kill when they had a comfortable life like the one he was offering them? "Okay, we are." But before the man could finish his sentence, a dagger suddenly flew out of nowhere and stabbed the man right through the heart. Blood immediately gushed out of his chest. His eyes were wide open. He extended his right hand and waved it in the air. He fell into a pool of his own blood as if he had died with eternal regret. The smile on Kevin's face instantly froze. The only thought in his mind was, even if you are going to die, you have to finish your sentence before falling over. Then a few more daggers flew through the air and took the lives of the others. In less than 5 seconds, 5 living people turned into corpses. Blood flowed out of their bodies and stained the ground red. Kevin froze on the spot. His pupil shrank to the size of a needle. "Who is it?" he called out. "You can be quite persuasive, can't you?" A cold voice suddenly sounded. Kevin's heart sank. He quickly leaned his body to the side and pressed against the wall. He had seen the owner of this voice not too long ago. It was the Blood Wolf. "It's you!" Kevin took a deep breath. "I told you I would not let you go. You shouldn't have come here."
The Blood Wolf appeared in front of him and wore a mocking smile. Kevin was stunned. He suddenly realized a problem that he hadn't thought of before. If it was just a few ordinary killers, how could they dare to follow him in broad daylight? Even the assassins sent by the secluded valley had experts like the Blood Wolf behind them. After 2 failed assassinations, how could the secluded valley not take him more seriously? Kevin's throat instantly dried up. It was useless to say anything now. The only thing that could save him was to run away as fast as he could. As long as he reached the busy street, the Blood Wolf would not dare to attack him in public. From where he was standing to the exit of the alley onto the street, there was less than 50 feet. Unfortunately, the only obstacle was the Blood Wolf standing in front of him. In an instant, the night dagger appeared in Kevin's hands. He could only survive if he called upon his powerful weapons and fought his way past the Blood Wolf.
Do you still want to struggle in vain before dying?
The Blood Wolf slowly took out 2 daggers and moved toward Kevin step by step.
Today, you are not so lucky to have the people of the Herbalist Society come to save you. If you know what's good for you, tell me about the technique that you used before. I can be merciful and give you a quick death.
If you want to know about it, I will have to die. Kevin's expression was extremely serious, and his hands tightly held onto the shaft of the night dagger.
Why do you have to be so stubborn?
The Blood Wolf gave a loud snort and, with the speed of a tiger descending a mountain, he leapt towards Kevin. A buzzing sound suddenly rang out. It was all because the speed of the dagger in the Blood Wolf's hand was so fast and it moved in a short period of time that it actually compressed the surrounding air. A blue light burst out from Kevin's body, and the Blood Wolf suddenly stopped on the spot. The tip of the dagger had already reached his throat. "Get lost!" Kevin shouted as he kicked the Blood Wolf's chest, sending him flying backward about 10 feet. A blood-red light bloomed, and in the blink of an eye, the Blood Wolf regained control of his body. The Blood Wolf's eyes were burning. Just a few moments before he clearly had the confidence to kill with a single strike, but his body was now thrashing out of his control. Kevin completely ignored him and took the opportunity to try to run towards the streets.
Kid, you've presented me with another great gift today. I want both your technique and your life.
A smile appeared on the Blood Wolf's face. Suddenly, like a kite with a broken string, Kevin flew backward and crashed into the wall. Blood gushed out from his mouth and half of his body seemed to be embedded in the wall. The Blood Wolf reappeared in front of him and looked at Kevin with a smile.
Such ability at such a young age. This is really rare,
the Blood Wolf said with a tone of admiration.
I'll give you one last chance. Tell me about that technique you used. Otherwise, I'll break every bone in your body before I kill you. I'll make you regret ever being born, the Blood Wolf said casually as if he was talking about an everyday thing.
Kevin's legs trembled as he stood up from the ground. He used his hands to cover his chest. At this moment, he was confident that at least 2 of his ribs were broken. He had underestimated the strength of the Blood Wolf. He had actually severely injured Kevin with just 1 strike. "Don't even think about it," Kevin shouted as he struggled to support his body.
Then you can't blame me.
The Blood Wolf's eyes flashed with rage. He flicked his right hand from below and a dagger flew out. Kevin slowly closed his eyes. He knew that he did not have the strength to dodge this attack. Many images from his life appeared in his mind. His parents were in St. Louis, and Lily was still waiting for him in Chicago. So many images swept through his mind like a tsunami, but the pain he was waiting for did not come. Kevin slowly opened his eyes. A man appeared in front of him. He raised his left hand in the air, and between his index and middle fingers was the dagger that the Blood Wolf had thrown. Kevin did not know the identity of the man.
But just from the fact that he had helped him, Kevin knew that he must be on his side.
"Who are you?"
The Blood Wolf questioned the man who had suddenly appeared.
"You dare to interfere in the matters of the secluded valley? Do you have a death wish?"
The secluded valley? Am I supposed to be intimidated by that? Who do you think you are? The man waved his left hand and threw the dagger he had caught into the ground. He put one hand behind his back and said, "If you want to live, get lost."
"Ha! I would like to see you try to make me,"
the Blood Wolf said as he reached for his waist and quickly threw several daggers towards the man at lightning speed. The man did not panic. He simply stepped on the ground with his right foot, and his body emitted a powerful burst of spiritual energy that stopped all of the daggers, suspending them in midair for a split second, and then watched as they all fell harmlessly to the ground. Immediately following that, dozens of daggers shot out from the Blood Wolf's hands. But the man simply stretched out a finger and the same thing happened. A blue light was emitted from his body, and it quickly covered everything in their surroundings, including the Blood Wolf. If Kevin was still in a clear-headed state, he would definitely be shocked. This person had used the same Blue Storm technique as he, although the power with which he did it was several times stronger than his. The Blood Wolf suddenly froze on the spot as if he had been immobilized. A blue light shot out from the man's hand and pierced through the Blood Wolf's abdomen. A large amount of blood flowed out from the hole in his body.
"You, who are you?"
The Blood Wolf's eyes widened as he looked at the man in disbelief. This man was really too strong for even the Blood Wolf. He had never heard of anyone being this powerful. "For the sake of the leader of the secluded valley, I'll spare your worthless life today. If you dare to attack Kevin ever again, I will slaughter every single person in the secluded valley. And I guarantee that the first person to die will be you," the man said quickly, unwilling to waste any more time on the Blood Wolf. He turned around, picked Kevin up off the ground, and disappeared into the alley. After an unknown period of time, Kevin felt that he had been drifting through a long dream. In the dream, he and Lily met for the first time, then got married and lived a happy and peaceful life. Although he knew that it was a dream, it felt so real that Kevin could not bear to wake up. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. It was not easy for Kevin to see the scene in front of him clearly. He was lying in a bed and there was nothing else in the room. There was a man standing by the window. It was you who saved me, wasn't it?" Kevin stammered as he struggled to support his body. Slowly, he sat up from his bed. "I was asked to find you. When I was passing by Washington, I felt the fluctuation of the Blue Storm technique. That's why I was able to find you and save you from the Blood Wolf," the man said as he turned his head. He was playing with a jade pendant that was carved with exquisite patterns. "Who are you? Who told you to come find me?" Kevin suddenly realized something. "Are you from the family that created the Blue Storm technique?" Glenn Humphrey had told him that there was a family in the upper realm that created the Blue Storm technique, and that Kevin's use of the technique might have attracted the attention of that family. Ever since he found out about the existence of the family, Kevin had been very careful with every step he took. Even when facing the Blood Wolf, he only chose to use the Blue Storm technique after much hesitation. After all, he had already used it once against the Blood Wolf. The man had also said that he had been asked to find Kevin by someone else. Kevin's mind was racing. Among the people he knew, there were only a handful of people who could know such a powerful person. The only possibilities that came to mind were Wayne Ford and Brett Stewart. Kevin was familiar with Wayne Ford's character, but he was sure that the old man already knew that he was in Washington. Moreover, it seemed unlikely that such a powerful expert could be affiliated with the Healing Arts School. Otherwise, Kevin surely would have heard of him by now. However, if it was someone from the Myriads, it would be even more shocking. Even though he hadn't seen Brett Stewart in a long time, he was also certain, given his own standing within the Myriads,
that he would have known about this man if he was associated with the Myriads as well. After thinking about it, Kevin couldn't think of anyone else. "Who exactly are you?" Kevin asked again. "There are some things that you shouldn't know yet." The man slowly put the jade pendant into his pocket. "Answer a few of my questions first. I am curious where you learned the Blue Storm technique." "Why should I tell you?" Kevin narrowed his eyes. Young man, you don't know the immensity of this world, but I can tell you that if you don't tell me where you learned it, I will kill you." The man's tone didn't change at all as he made this threat against Kevin's life. However, in the next second, an astonishingly powerful force seemed to erupt from his body, instantly enveloping the entire room. The first thing Kevin felt was as if he had fallen into a freezer. A bone-piercing chill enveloped him from all directions. He had never felt anything like it. The light in the man's eyes was so dense that it almost solidified. Kevin was certain that if he did not answer, this man wouldn't hesitate to take his life. My mentor gave it to me." At this critical moment, Kevin finally spoke up, but he didn't know if he was speaking too late to save his own life. After encountering the Blood Wolf again, Kevin knew that he was outmatched. Accepting his fate, Kevin closed his eyes as the Blood Wolf threw a dagger toward him. But suddenly a man appeared and easily caught the dagger that was heading straight towards Kevin's chest. The mysterious man displayed power like Kevin had never seen from anyone. After sparing the Blood Wolf's life, the man scooped up Kevin and deposited him in a room where Kevin awoke later. The man stood over him and demanded to know where he had learned the Blue Storm technique. Caving to the man's questions, Kevin revealed he learned the Blue Storm technique from his mentor. "Your mentor?" The man frowned and then smiled faintly. "Who is he?" I don't really know. He's very elusive, but you should know that if you dare to do anything out of line with me, he will never let you get away with it. Besides, although you are very strong, my mentor is not someone you can compare with, so I would suggest that you let me go." Kevin didn't know what to say to scare the man in front of him, but he tried his best. In any case, he had only been able to confirm one thing. He would definitely not be able to defeat this man on his own. Therefore, he could only try to talk his way out of this situation. "There are some other things you should know. I am a participant in the Herbalist Society's ongoing competition, and the young heir of the Morris family, Jake Morris, is a good friend of mine." Hearing this, the man frowned slightly. He had only asked a single question. He didn't expect that this kid's mouth would be like a cannon, spouting a bunch of useless pieces of information one after another. "I only have one question that I would like the answer to. Are you willing to walk away from your mentor and accept me as your mentor instead?" The man asked this with his hands held behind his back as he slightly raised his chin in a way that made him look like an otherworldly expert. You want to be my mentor? Well, what do you have to offer me?" Kevin said, mustering up some courage. In any case, there seemed to be many people who wanted to be his mentor. "I can teach you the real Blue Storm technique. I have looked into you. Although you know a little bit, you still have a lot to learn. With your current power base, if you can fully utilize the Blue Storm technique, someone like that so-called Blood Wolf certainly wouldn't be any match for you." The man lowered his eyes and looked at Kevin. He sounded like a teacher who was speaking to a student who had failed to meet his expectations. Kevin stammered and then took a deep breath. No one had ever belittled him in terms of his skill set before. Even the Night King admired his talent. "Well, what about you? How do I know that your Blue Storm technique is so powerful?" Kevin demanded angrily. "Although I cannot call myself the top expert in the world, I can guarantee that the Blue Storm technique that I am capable of is something that no one else in the world has the ability to do." The man replied as if this information was common knowledge and therefore something everyone knew already. "You're bragging quite a bit. You must really believe it's true." If you're really that powerful, show me some of your skills." Kevin stubbornly turned his head to the side, unwilling to admit what the man had said. "All right, then I will let you experience it today," the man said as he slowly extended his right hand. His index finger was as nimble as a butterfly dancing in the air. Instantly, everything that could be seen in the room changed. As if some kind of spatial shift had occurred, Kevin suddenly had a vision that he was in the midst of a sea of blooming flowers. Countless bees and butterflies danced in the air, and from time to time, an eagle would fly across the sky. It let out a soul-stirring cry. Kevin suddenly turned his head to look at the man. At the moment, he was like a god descending to the mortal world, stepping on a bridge constructed of rainbows. "Are you willing to take me as your mentor now?" the man asked with his lips slightly open. His voice seemed to have come from inside Kevin's head and all around him at the same time. It was as if the sound was falling from the sky to surround Kevin. This must be some kind of illusion," Kevin said with some unwillingness. He was convinced it must be like someone on the street doing a magic trick. This must be just some kind of illusion, or perhaps the man had even drugged him, Kevin thought to himself. "An illusion?" The man let out a cold snort with a smile. He slightly moved his feet and then threw a stone toward Kevin. The stone brushed past Kevin's face. The glancing blow cut the side of Kevin's cheek. Blood immediately dripped out. If everything in front of him was fake, then what was he to make of the pain he felt on his face? "Do you still think it's fake now?" the man asked with a smile. "Who are you?" Kevin asked in shock. The man's ability was shocking. It was hard to figure out what was real and what was fake. "My name is Leo Hayes," the man proudly said his name. As soon as he finished speaking, everything around him retreated like the tide. Only then did Kevin see clearly that he was still lying in the bed. Everything that had happened before seemed like a dream, and yet it was so vividly real. It was too strange. "Do I have the right to be your teacher now?" Leo asked. He was still standing in the same spot. The smile on his face did not change and remained broad and cheerful. Yes, you do," Kevin murmured. "I don't know whether it's right or wrong to accept you now, but from today onward I will teach you for 3 hours a day." Leo hesitated and said, "I only hope that what I did today will not become a mistake in the future." "What do you mean?" Kevin frowned and asked carefully. "Don't you understand that curiosity kills the cat?" Leo scolded him unhappily. "This place is only half an hour away from Herbalist City. You can go back there after you rest for a while. The first task I give you is to win the final championship of this competition." After he said these words, Leo Hayes turned and quickly left the room. His words stirred up a storm in Kevin's heart. Although Leo did not say it clearly, Kevin had the distinct impression that he knew Kevin's every move like the back of his hand. This feeling made Kevin very uncomfortable. After leaving Kevin, Leo Hayes arrived at a mountain peak by himself. Soon another old man appeared. If Kevin were here, he would definitely recognize this man as none other than the Night King. "I did as you said. I have accepted him as my disciple," Leo said faintly. "This kid is really just like what you said. He is a good seedling." The Night King stood next to him, stroking his beard. "You are the only one in the world who can teach him the Blue Storm technique. It just so happens that he has already been noticed by the people of that family. Maybe you can use him to clear some old debts," he said unhurriedly. A look of rage suddenly flashed in Leo's eyes as he said, "I don't need to rely on a kid like him for my business. I've already taken him on as my student. I will pay you back what I owe you then. After that, we don't owe each other anything. But don't worry. I will nurture him with all of my heart. I can guarantee you that. Leo Hayes knew that his Blue Storm technique was the best in the world. However, he also knew that standing above the tide would inevitably lead to a lot of undeserved disasters. In addition, he had always been a loner, and because of this he had offended a lot of his enemies. Many forces had forced him to join them, and his friends and family had long since betrayed him. When he was seriously injured and on the verge of dying, he had no family and friends to come to his aid. In the end, it was the Night King who appeared to save Leo. Since then, he knew that he owed the Night King his life. After that incident, Leo finally learned to keep a low profile. He had been living in seclusion in the deep mountains and no longer cared about worldly matters. That was until the Night King personally sent him to Washington, D.C., and asked him to find Kevin and accept him as a student to teach him the power of the Blue Storm technique. Although he hadn't shown his face for many years, the Night King had no doubt about Leo's current abilities. And the Night King also knew that if Kevin learned one more skill, especially one as powerful as the Blue Storm technique, he would have another way to save his life when the time came. The Night King was still full of hope and expectation for Kevin's future. It was past 6 o'clock in the evening when Kevin returned to Herbalist City from Leo Hayes' cabin. Olivia had just put some food on the table. At first glance, Kevin could tell that the dishes she had prepared were delicious. Compared to the other competitors, there was simply a world of difference. "Where did you go today?" Olivia asked as she skillfully placed the bowls and forks on the small table. "Has the competition start time been announced?" Kevin asked as he sat down, ignoring the bowl in front of him. "Someone came to make the announcement this afternoon, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Due to the incident that happened last time, everyone in the Herbalist Society has been briefed on it. As a result, the rules have changed significantly." When Olivia mentioned this, she sighed and her face immediately collapsed. The fork in her hand also dropped onto the table. Hearing this, Kevin's face revealed a bitter smile. Although Olivia did not say it clearly, he could also understand it completely. Wasn't the thing that everyone knew about him the fact that he had blown up the furnace? What did they change? Kevin asked as he took a bite of the food. "The new rule states that from now on there will not be any specific pill refinement from our group. The final result will be judged from the grade of the medicinal pills that everyone refines." The more Olivia spoke, the more depressed she became. Kevin knew very well that he had many pill formulas in his hands. Moreover, he had collected a large amount of herbs at the internal market. Any one of about a dozen pills in his repertoire could easily make him the champion of this competition. However, there was a very important problem underlying all of this. On the surface, the Herbalist Society was trying to level the playing field for the contestants, but in fact, they were also testing his ability by creating obstacles. Previously, when he was refining the augmentation pill, he had cleverly dodged those hurdles. But the next round of the competition would make it difficult for him to have the same luck. As he thought of the many questions that raced through his mind, Kevin chewed his food slowly. "Looks like it's time to find some friends to help," Kevin thought to himself. After they finished eating, Kevin walked directly to the door. He glanced around and saw Mason Zimmerman carrying a large box and happily walking towards his villa. At that moment, Kevin suddenly thought of something. "Mason, what are you carrying? Looks like it's pretty heavy. Do you need a hand?" Kevin asked as he ran up to him. "What are you doing here?" Mason frowned and turned his body sideways to protect the box behind him. "I doubt I'm going to last much longer in the competition, so I just wanted to relax and enjoy the sights. That way I'll also have something to reminisce about in the future," Kevin replied with a smile on his face. "Is your group really that strong? You don't think you can win?" Mason Zimmerman frowned even more tightly. His interest was not necessarily directed at Kevin, but more so at the fact that Olivia was also in his group. Mason still didn't quite believe that there was nothing between Olivia and Kevin, but if Mason could keep his eyes on Olivia and be in her presence constantly, Perhaps he could prove how true his love for her was. Upon Kevin's return to Herbalist City from Leo Hayes' cabin, Olivia Rafferty revealed that the next morning's competition round would no longer require their group to refine any specific pill. Instead, they would be judged based on the grade of their chosen medicinal pill. While Kevin knew that this rule change could easily make him champion, he knew that the Herbalist Society was clearly using this to discover the level of his ability. Kevin conferred with Mason, who continued to think that Olivia may prefer Kevin to him. Of course, Mason, you don't know how many talented people there are in the third group. In fact, our group is so strong that I think I can only get third place at most. But at the same time, I'm well aware that Olivia is also in the same group as me. If I take her spot... Kevin's eyebrows twitched a few times as he spoke. Mason didn't notice. If he did, he might have realized that Kevin's words weren't in line with his actions. Kevin continued, "Given this, I've thought about it for a long time and made my decision. I will defeat the other contestants for Olivia. Then I will take the initiative to withdraw from the competition. This way she will definitely be able to finish in the top 3. Are you saying that you want to withdraw from the competition for Olivia?" Mason Zimmerman's expression became even more serious. Since catching the two of them in Kevin's room, he had always been unable to figure out the exact nature of the relationship between him and Olivia Rafferty. Plus, after seeing the two of them in the hospital the other night, he couldn't shake off the thought of Kevin as his rival for Olivia's heart. With Mason Zimmerman's status and reputation, he shouldn't have a problem finding a partner. By a mere mention of his background, who knew how many women would take the initiative to throw themselves into his arms? However, Mason was a stubborn person. After falling in love with Olivia at first sight, he had been unable to move on from his infatuation with her ever since. She was the only woman Mason would ever love. He was as certain of that as he lived and breathed. Within the same circle, as long as anyone knew about this matter, almost no other man would dare to make a move toward Olivia. However, Kevin was an outsider who seemed to defy all odds in gaining her trust so quickly. Thinking about Olivia's attitude toward him, all she did was either fight or scold Mason in an effort to reject his advances and push him away. But how did she feel about Kevin? She took care of him when he was injured and waited patiently for him to come back to his room for hours. That clearly meant something, yet Mason couldn't exactly figure out what that was. Only God knew how jealous Mason was whenever he heard their laughter coming from next door these past few days. And now that Kevin wanted to quit the competition for the sake of Olivia, was this equivalent to giving him some kind of an invisible warning? "Kevin, don't forget what I said to you. No one else in this world is worthy of Olivia's love other than me. Don't you dare have any thoughts of stealing her away from me. It would just be wishful thinking anyway." Mason's face gradually became gloomy. "Although Olivia treats you better than me at the moment, I still won't give up. In time, I will prove that I'm the right guy for her." "What?" Kevin looked at Mason with a blank face. He didn't quite understand what Mason was talking about. He didn't even come to him today to talk about Olivia. Did Mason misunderstand what he was trying to point out? "Mason, we seem to have deviated from the main point." Kevin gently wiped the sweat on his forehead. "No, we haven't. At the end of the day, Olivia is the most important person to me," Mason said as he raised his head and gave Kevin an arrogant look. "That's good. We can both agree on that, so don't worry. I will never fight with you for Olivia's affection. Besides, as I've already told you, I am already very happily married," Kevin reassured him. It's easy for men to lie. Anything you say to me is useless. Actions speak louder than words," Mason said. Kevin opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything at the moment. In order to reel him in and regain his trust, he would have to carefully think of something that couldn't be refuted by him. With this, the two of them stared at each other for a long time at the door of Mason's villa. Neither of them spoke to break the awkward silence. After a long pause, Kevin slowly spoke. "Then out of consideration for Olivia, why don't we go inside your villa so that I can give you some detailed advice to help you win her over? With my tips, she will definitely look at you in a new light, which I'm sure you would be grateful for." Upon hearing this, Mason was suddenly stunned. He then narrowed his eyes and gave Kevin a piercing look. To be honest, he did not like this person, especially after what happened that night in the hospital when Olivia actually left him behind and ran away with Kevin. If Mason hadn't been able to get away, he would have died long ago at the hands of those killers. And when he came back injured, he felt that he had missed a great opportunity to show Olivia what he was capable of in a life-or-death situation. "Tell me, what exactly can you give me that would help me win her over?" Mason asked in disbelief. "I'm sure you don't know as much as you'd like to know about Olivia, right? As the saying goes, whether it's 1 day or 100 days of living with someone, does it really make a difference when you spend so much time together? Although I haven't known her for a long time, being her roommate for the past few days has definitely allowed me to get to know her better than most people, including you." Kevin continued to speak, hoping that something he said about Olivia, about his friendship with her, about her role in the competition, would hit home for Mason soon. "Is that really true?" Mason asked doubtfully. "Of course." Seeing that this had really moved him, Kevin saw that it was about time to seal the deal, as he reached out and grabbed Mason's shoulder. "Mason, you are a famous genius in Washington, D.C. How could someone like me play tricks on you?" Kevin's strategy to appease Mason seemed to have worked, as his flattering words made him feel a sense of comfort in his heart. "All right. I can let you in, but you have to remember that my villa is much more luxurious than your little room over there, so you have to be careful. If anything breaks, you won't be able to afford to replace it." Mason casually reminded Kevin before he turned around and slowly walked inside. The moment Kevin closed the door, 6 shadowy forms went from hiding in a dark corner to leaping onto their victim, Kevin. "You mean Kevin and that brat from the Zimmerman family are together right now?" The commissioner slowly put down the coffee cup in his hand and asked. "Yes, Commissioner." The spy half knelt on the ground and answered respectfully. "That shouldn't be the case. Didn't that Zimmerman kid like the girl from the Rafferty family? Over the past few days, he has regarded Kevin as his rival in that little love triangle of theirs. How could they suddenly get together in his villa? Could it be that something unexpected happened between those two that we don't know about?" The old man in blue stroked his long beard and wondered with a slight frown. "I remember that night when the secluded valley attacked Kevin. Mason Zimmerman also helped." The old man in white understood the situation very well. The commissioner tapped his finger on the table gently. He had been secretly observing Kevin and the others since the start of the competition. Given that they were all people of high status and the Herbalist Society was already such a huge power, they shouldn't do such a despicable thing. However, the commissioner couldn't do anything about it right now. After all, Kevin had something that the Herbalist Society didn't have. To the Herbalist Society, pill formulas were the most important thing, as the organization had been built on this foundation since the very beginning. Therefore, only by getting their hands on more formulas could the Herbalist Society be able to grow steadily and increase the bargaining chips in their hands to stay in power, effectively securing their place as one of the 4 giants in the upper realm in the future. With the Murphy, Eubanks, and Thompson families all behind Kevin, it has already become very difficult to deal with him. Now, if he's truly gained the Zimmerman family as another ally, could it be that we really have no way to deal with this kid? The old man in blue's violent temper was immediately aroused. It made him so angry that he clenched one of his fists and violently punched his other palm. Kevin's plot to win the support of the Zimmerman family had him revealing a plan to Mason Zimmerman, in which Olivia would win the herbalist competition. Mason, though, continued to see Kevin as a rival for Olivia's love and was unsure of Kevin's intentions, which were complicated by Kevin's scheme to befriend Mason. A spy for the Herbalist Society noted the growing friendship to the commissioner, who lamented that Kevin's power base would grow should the Zimmermans support him. The commissioner's underling, the old man in white, slowly lowered his head, his eyes revealing a thoughtful expression as the commissioner gave his orders to the spy. "The Zimmerman family probably doesn't know about this yet," the commissioner murmured. "Continue to monitor Kevin. Report to me immediately if anything happens." "Yes, sir," the spy said respectfully, then nodded at the two men in blue and white before slowly leaving the room.
At this rate, it seems that Kevin is quite capable of becoming a major threat to us in the future. If we really can't use him to further the Herbalist Society's plans, we must get rid of him as soon as possible in order to protect our current position.
The old man in blue uttered coldly as if he had already decided to kill Kevin in his mind. Life is always full of surprises. When you succeed, you must never let your guard down because there are no guarantees that fate, or one's enemies, might make sure that success is short-lived. Back at the competitor's village, Kevin was in great danger. Though the fact that the leader of the shadowy group of men had been talking so much meant that despite the fact that Kevin was outnumbered 6-1, he was still alive. The six knew that, at last, they were going to see Kevin breathe his last, and just as the men in black turned their heads around to finish the job, Leo Hayes suddenly walked in on them with a gloomy expression. He first glanced at Kevin, who was lying on the ground. After his eyes paused on the pool of blood on the ground beside him for a moment, Leo Hayes' face became darker as he grimly remarked, "It does not make me happy to see that my star student has been beaten to the point that his blood is spilled all over the floor."
"And you are?"
The leader of the men looked at Leo Hayes vigilantly, sizing him up from head to toe, seemingly unable to get an idea of what Leo was thinking or what he might be about to do. "You don't deserve to know who I am. After all, dead people don't need to remember my name." Leo looked at them coldly.
"Shameless boasting."
The leader let out a disdainful snort. But just as he was about to order his subordinates to make a move, something strange happened. A clear blue light emitted from Leo Hayes' body. In less than 3 seconds, the entire room was covered by it. The 5 men in black suddenly felt like they were transported to another dimension as Kevin, who was lying on the ground, as well as the other men in black who had died, all disappeared into thin air. In their place, the solid ground had seemingly turned into a river of blood, while several blue flowers bloomed beside Leo Hayes. Combined with his pale and emotionless face, everything looked eerie and terrifying.
"The blue storm technique."
The leader's pupil suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. He then immediately reacted and reminded his subordinates,
"Be careful. Don't believe any of what you see in front of you."
It seemed that the leader was someone who was experienced enough to recognize that this was just a powerful illusion. Unfortunately, it was too vivid for the others to ignore. Several blue flowers surrounded Leo Hayes' body and kept moving up and down. There was also a fierce eagle that hovered around them, and it was slowly approaching them with its sharp talons extended in front of it. Although the 5 men in black were all strong and ferocious people with many battles in their past, this was the first time they had encountered such an event. Though they were somewhat aware that this was just a vision, they couldn't help but feel a rare sense of fear in their hearts. They stepped back and formed a circle, and as they anxiously scanned their surroundings, no one dared to move forward without permission. Suddenly, one of the flowers moved. With a swooshing sound, the body of one of the men in black immediately stiffened as the flower's petals slit his throat and soaked his entire body with his own blood.
He didn't even have the time to make a sound before he fell lifelessly to the ground. The other men in black panicked when they saw this. If what they saw was all fake, then how was that flower able to take someone's life?
It's a bluff.
The leader bit the tip of his tongue and threw himself at Leo Hayes. He knew the situation very well. Only by fighting with all his strength could he have a chance of survival. Otherwise, by doing nothing, it was the same as surrendering and letting Leo Hayes slaughter him without even putting up a fight. A flower suddenly appeared in front of the leader, but he didn't choose to dodge it. He waved his fist, which was wrapped in spiritual energy, and punched through it with all his might. Upon striking the flower, the man didn't feel any pain or obstruction. It was as if his fist had simply hit the air. Therefore, his confidence increased greatly.
I told you guys that he was just bluffing. This is all an illusion.
As his voice fell, the three men in black behind him followed closely, even as they remembered that another illusion had slit the throat of their friend. Just then, a few more flowers besides Leo Hayes attacked, as their petals turned into blades and flew toward the four men from all directions. This time, the four of them were no longer intimidated. With strong momentum, they lunged at Leo Hayes. However, they were unable to defend themselves against the flowers, whose petals started piercing through their bodies and cutting back and forth at lightning speed. The four of them stopped less than 2 steps away from Leo Hayes. Their eyes were all filled with disbelief as they fell to the ground, one after the other.
Being stupid is the biggest reason why you were killed.
Leo didn't even look at them as he slowly stepped over their bodies. A second later, the surrounding illusion disappeared, revealing that everyone was indeed still inside Mason Zimmerman's villa this entire time. With all the men in black now lying on the ground, it became clear that each of them had at least 10 wounds on their bodies, though only one would have been needed. Each wound would have caused instant death. Meanwhile, Kevin lay unconscious in a corner after being nearly suffocated in the attack by the shadowy men. His breathing was labored, and it seemed as though he was in danger of dying at any moment.
Kid, how could you be reduced to such a state by a few pieces of trash?
Leo shook his head while thinking that despite Kevin's powers, there were still things he could learn from masters like himself. Leo then picked up Kevin and quickly left the villa. Not long after, word about the incident reached the commissioner.
What did you say? Kevin was attacked in Mason Zimmerman's villa?
The commissioner stood up from his chair in shock.
Yes, we have already verified that there were traces of a fight in the villa. Mason Zimmerman was also seriously injured in the courtyard.
The old man in white answered respectfully.
The identity of the assassin's leader has been confirmed. He is none other than the Blood Leopard.
The Blood Leopard? The commissioner's facial expression turned even uglier.
Not only did he attack, but he also died along with all of his subordinates.
The old man in white revealed a gloomy expression.
How is that possible? The Blood Leopard was at least a first-stage level 5 expert, and he had 5 trusted subordinates who were also at comparable strengths to his. With such a well-trained and highly coordinated group, no one in Washington could have defeated them all.
How is that possible? The Blood Leopard was at least a first-stage level 5 expert, and he had 5 trusted subordinates who were also at comparable strengths to his. With such a well-trained and highly coordinated group, no one in Washington could have defeated them all.
The old man in blue's eyes filled with shock as if he had just found out something far-fetched.
Well, the Blood Leopard and his 5 subordinates are now lying dead here in Herbalist City. If you don't believe me, you can go to Mason Zimmerman's villa and take a look yourself. You'll then be able to confirm with your own eyes whether what I said is true or not.
The old man in white glanced at him and replied,
Moreover, those people died in an extremely miserable manner. I really can't figure out who could kill them apart from that old fellow who hasn't shown himself for many years."
Upon hearing this, the commissioner slowly sat back in his chair and took a few deep breaths to calm his emotions. With his current status, there were very few things that could shock him. The 10 great experts of the secluded valley were not only notorious among the higher-ups in business and politics, but across all of the major powers in the entire country. Kevin and Mason Zimmerman survived in ambush by a group of assassins only thanks to the arrival of Leo Hayes, who used his Blue Storm technique to kill the attackers. Leo took unconscious Kevin with him, as the commissioner learned from his spies that the attack was led by the notorious Blood Leopard from the secluded valley, and the commissioner was shocked that anyone could be powerful enough to best him in a battle. Both the Blood Wolf and the Blood Leopard were sent out to kill Kevin, but instead one of the secluded valley's 10 great experts was dead. The commissioner found this turn of events nearly impossible to believe.
Could it be that Kevin isn't as simple as we thought? What if there's another more powerful expert behind him?
The old man in blue licked his lips while thinking hard and trying to see through the current situation. "Has Kevin been found?" The commissioner, who had been silent for a long time, asked faintly. The old man in white did not answer. He just shook his head and sighed. In fact, none of them had paid much attention to Kevin in the past. In other words, they all felt that the difference in reputation between them and Kevin was too great. In their eyes, Kevin was just a young kid who had come out of nowhere. Despite having some impressive pill recipes in his hands, he was too weak to challenge the Herbalist Society in his own right. And even with the support of a few families in Washington, he was nothing to worry about and was not worth their effort at all. However, Kevin seemed much different now. Suddenly, there were so many unknown experts that appeared out of nowhere to protect him. Even the chairman of the Herbalist Society had just warned that if anything bad happened to Kevin, the commissioner himself, Vincent Reeves, would be buried with him. How could they have underestimated this ant? Although they didn't know the reason behind the chairman's instructions, if the commissioner was killed, could the 2 men in blue and white still live a good life, or would they be next on the chopping block? "Send someone to find Kevin for me immediately. And don't just limit yourselves to Herbalist City. Even if it means turning the entirety of Washington, D.C. upside down and digging 6 feet into the ground, he must be found. Remember, I don't want a corpse. I want him alive." Vincent Reeves roared hysterically. Meanwhile, back in the hospital in Chicago, Lily had already woken up from her surgery. As soon as she found out, Officer Emmett immediately rushed over to see her. "I've already said that Lily needs to rest, and she will not be able to cooperate with you during this period of time." Dalton Steele crossed his arms in front of his chest and used his big and strong body to block Officer Emmett and the others from entering the room. "Mr. Steele, do you know what you're doing? We're in the middle of an official police investigation here. Obstruction of justice is no small matter. You can serve up to 5 years in prison for that," Officer Emmett retorted fearlessly. "If you think you can keep stirring up trouble like this, then you'd better watch your own back. Don't think that your reputation is so clean." "What is that supposed to mean?" Dalton's anger instantly rose, and his eyes widened as he questioned her. You should know what I'm talking about." Officer Emmett's tone dropped again. "I'm telling you one last time to get out of the way. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impartial and enforcing the rule of law on you." "Is that so? In that case, I want to see who would dare to stop me today." Dalton clenched his fist and stood firmly at the door. He had no intention of retreating at all. "Oh, right. Before you do anything, there is something else that I should remind you about, Officer Emmett. Please don't use the past to pressure me. After all, I am now a powerful expert, so some laws that apply to ordinary citizens don't really concern me anymore." With these words, it seemed that Dalton Steele was no longer the hot-blooded bully who only knew how to fight with his fists. As the saying goes, even hardwood bends when strong people take it into their hands. After following Kevin for so long, Dalton now liked to read psychology books to gain a better understanding of how others think and behave. In doing so, he managed to improve his ability to analyze a situation first instead of acting on impulse. As expected, as soon as his voice fell, Officer Emmett and the other police officers who had come with her were all too stunned to make a move. For years, Dalton Steele had been notorious in Chicago for being one of the most feared leaders in the underground scene. Since the last time they left the hospital, the other police officers had talked to Officer Emmett several times in an attempt to convince her not to go up against him head-to-head. And with that reputation alone, it already wouldn't have been easy for them to muster up the courage to follow her orders, especially if she insisted that they forcefully arrest Dalton Steele. But just like what Dalton had said, an expert was not someone that ordinary people like them dared to touch, bringing an added wrinkle to their current situation. Officer Emmett tried her best not to be intimidated by his strong words, saying, "Don't think that just because you're an expert you—"
"But federal law does not allow experts to make a move on ordinary citizens, right?"
Dalton raised his eyebrows and interrupted her without changing his expression.
"You must not forget that it works both ways. Since Lily is a student of the Healing Arts School, she can be considered as half an expert. How much power do you have to dare to break the law?"
Officer Emmett didn't know how to refute Dalton Steele's continuous questioning, because what he said was true. Experts couldn't interfere too much with the matters of ordinary citizens, but at the same time, ordinary citizens shouldn't give experts a reason to disturb the peace either. Many ordinary citizens in Chicago have already been affected by the incident at the Williams Company. With multiple witnesses of the explosion at that time, if we don't do our job and make things clear, then it would be very difficult for us to prove our innocence to the public. Officer Emmett did not want to return empty-handed. She stubbornly told them everything that she could think of to get Dalton Steele and the others to reconsider. However, Dalton simply sneered at her.
"That's your problem. You can investigate the truth yourself without harassing Lily for answers. Besides, isn't she the victim here? How come you didn't take the initiative to look for her?"
Before Dalton finished speaking, Rachel quickly walked out of the room. "Let them in," she declared.
"What?"
Dalton was stunned. "Lily said so," Rachel said as she gave Officer Emmett a deep look. What had happened between Officer Emmett and Kevin was not a big secret to them. By now, many people had heard about the Union and the William family's hot pursuit of Kevin. At the same time, since Officer Emmett was a junior member of the Union, Rachel and the others knew that she had to be careful about using force against Lily. Otherwise, it would not only mean the end of her police career, but she could also face grave consequences in court as well. Under Rachel's persuasion, Dalton reluctantly gave up half of the doorway as Officer Emmett let out a light snort and quickly walked into the hospital room. Lily sat quietly in the hospital bed. Due to what had happened to her recently, plus the fact that she had just experienced several hours of surgery, her face looked extremely pale. Because of this, her entire body looked weak and frail. "I'm very sorry to bother you, Mrs. Williams. Given that we're in the middle of an investigation, we still need you to cooperate with us to make an official statement at a time like this. But don't worry, I won't take too much of your time away from your rest," Officer Emmett said as she pulled a chair from the side to sit down by Lily's bedside. However, although her words sounded very polite and sincere, there was another complicated look in the depths of her eyes. "There's no need to beat around the bush, Officer Emmett. If you need me to make a statement, my only request is that you kindly ask your colleagues to wait outside first. I don't feel comfortable being in the same room with too many strangers," Lily said without looking up. She was still flipping through the documents of the Williams Company in her hand. While Rachel had offered to handle these documents on her behalf while she recovered, Lily declined and asked someone to send them to her. From this, it could be seen how serious Lily had valued her position in the Williams Company. Mrs. Williams, I'm sure it must be very difficult for you to suddenly have to take over such a big company like the Williams Company, right? Officer Emmett's tone was somewhat sour as she asked. She had previously done a very detailed background check on Lily. From this, she found out that when the Jones family was still around, it was just a small family in Chicago. Later on, when the Jones family was wiped out overnight, Kevin helped Lily by eventually appointing her as the new CEO of the Williams Company. Now that she was the most powerful woman in Chicago, Lily's reputation and popularity even exceeded Rachel's, and yet Officer Emmett enjoyed questioning Lily in a way that reminded her that Lily's fortunes were thanks to the success and money and power of Kevin, more than they were from her own family and background. Lily's own family and her own business enterprises, in Officer Emmett's mind, were failures. As soon as Lily woke up after her surgery, Officer Emmett rushed over to the hospital to see her. Dalton tried to stop Emmett, but to his surprise, Lily led Officer Emmett inside under the assumption that she only came to question her regarding the incident at the Williams Company. But after seeing Lily browsing through some company documents on her bed, Officer Emmett seemed to look down on her in pity and asked whether it was difficult to be in her current position as the new CEO of the Williams Company. "What does that have to do with the investigation? That is a matter that doesn't concern you, Officer Emmett. You don't need to concern yourself about my abilities." Lily's tone didn't change at all. She remained firm, direct, businesslike. "Now, if you have nothing else to ask me, please go back to the police station. I still have a lot of important things to deal with, and I don't have that much time to waste." Officer Emmett was about to say something, but she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth upon hearing this. The atmosphere in the hospital room had suddenly become cold. Meanwhile, Kevin's entire surroundings had become pitch black as he walked aimlessly in the dark for an unknown amount of time. Without any direction or purpose, what was the point of persisting in going down this endless path? Just then, a white light lit up in front of him. When Kevin suddenly opened his eyes, he realized that he had returned to Leo Hayes' wooden cabin.
"You're finally awake."
Leo Hayes slowly walked over with a glass bowl in his hand. He then placed it in front of Kevin and instructed,
"Drink this."
Without any hesitation, Kevin took the bowl and drank its contents. The medicine that Leo Hayes had prepared was colorless and tasteless, like ordinary water, but with a much thicker consistency that was similar to jelly. Prior to this, the last thing he could remember was that he had been seriously injured and poisoned. Kevin knew that if he was truly on the brink of death, those killers should have had no reason to let him go.
"The one who wanted to kill you this time was the Blood Leopard, one of the top 10 experts in the secluded valley. Rest assured, I have already taken care of it, so you're safe for now."
Leo updated him concisely.
"Although I don't know how you managed to provoke the secluded valley, this matter of yours with those assassins cannot be delayed for too long, so take care of it as soon as possible."
While listening to his words, Kevin licked his dry mouth. He could clearly feel the slow heat caused by the medicine entering his stomach. It was as if there was warm energy spreading across his limbs, causing his muscles and bones to gradually heat up.
"I have already treated your wounds, and the poison in your body has been almost completely discharged as well. When you have more or less recovered your strength, you just need to refine 2 antidotes for yourself so that you're fully healed."
Leo took out a book from his pocket.
"Take this book with you and study it. There are many things about the Blue Storm technique recorded in it."
Hearing this, Kevin turned his eyes to the book and asked in surprise, Is that one of the secret books?"
"Indeed it is. I managed to obtain this book by chance many years ago, although it was only half of the full volume. However, the section on the Blue Storm technique recorded in this book is more detailed than anything else that I've come across. I'm sure that even the family who uses this technique as its foundation doesn't have access to such a powerful guide."
After Leo finished speaking, he then looked at Kevin, who didn't say a word. A strange expression flashed across Kevin's eyes before he turned around and left. Looking at the book in his hand, Kevin was shocked. When he was sure that Leo Hayes was no longer around, he immediately took out the secret book that he had been keeping in his pocket. When he raised the two books in front of him side by side, they looked exactly the same from the outside, and their texture was also very similar. What's going on? Kevin thought to himself. Could it be that there are still many more copies of the secret book in other people's possession? Without even noticing, Kevin had stayed in Leo Hayes' wooden cabin for 5 days. By then, all of the injuries and toxins in his body had almost been eliminated. During this period of time, Kevin also used his free time to carefully study the secret book that Leo Hayes had given him. Comparing it with his own copy, he found that the contents of the two books were completely in sync with each other from cover to cover.
Kevin, be careful when you go back to Herbalist City. Whether it's the Herbalist Society or the Secluded Valley, neither of them is as simple as you think, so don't underestimate them.
Before leaving, Leo Hayes gave Kevin more meaningful advice.
Also, I am not satisfied with what you've shown thus far, and I won't tolerate mentoring a weak student who doesn't take my guidance seriously. Remember that you must stand at the peak of the younger generation. Only then can I teach you lessons that will further expand your horizons.
Leo Hayes' words caused Kevin to think deeply on the way back to Herbalist City, as he tried his best to understand the meaning behind them. Shortly after arriving at the entrance of Herbalist City, Kevin was immediately brought to where the commissioner had been discussing things with a few members of the Herbalist Society.
Are you all right? I heard that there was an assassination attempt on you by someone from the Secluded Valley. I was scared to death.
The commissioner anxiously checked on Kevin, as if he was truly concerned for his life.
The people of the Secluded Valley are too bold. They actually dared to come to the territory of the Herbalist Society and attack our contestants. But don't worry, I've already sent people to cause some trouble for them.
He then added,
It's good to see that you have almost fully recovered. Anyway, don't just stand there. Come and sit down over here with me. How about you try this specialty coffee that I have here?
The commissioner's string of words was like a bullet that caught Kevin by surprise. He couldn't help but feel stumped by what he had just heard. In Kevin's mind, the commissioner had always been a man with an enormous power base and a high status. Moreover, there was no trace of a friendship or even an alliance between Kevin and the commissioner, and it could even be said that the two were actually on bad terms. But now, barraged with Vincent Reeves's many flowery words, Kevin sat on the sofa in a daze. He raised the cup of coffee that was handed to him and drank a sip of it without even taking notice of its taste. After some time, Kevin finally came back to his senses. He then smiled bitterly and slowly remarked, "Commissioner, if there is something that you need to tell me, just say it. I'm not used to these kinds of events."
Kevin, you are one of our most skilled contestants in this competition, and it would have been a shame to eliminate you for not being able to show up due to unforeseen circumstances. Therefore, in light of such a life-threatening incident, I decided to put off your group's evaluation until your return, the commissioner explained. Previously, I admit that I was a little harsh with you. I hope you didn't take it to heart too much, as I am actually a very nice person. You have to understand my difficulties. As commissioner, I can't help but be careful when dealing with others. Anyway, let's not talk about what happened before. In the future, the two of us will be very good friends,
the commissioner said as he poured coffee for Kevin.
By the way, my name is Vincent Reeves, and you can call me Vincent from now on. If you need anything for the competition, feel free to bring it to my attention. No matter how difficult it is to find, I will think of a way to get it for you.
The old man in blue, who stood off to the side, stared at Kevin with a complicated expression. The old man in white, who was sitting on the other side, lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. Despite their different reactions, both men were attempting to figure out exactly what Kevin was and how much power he held. Kevin couldn't help but frown even more when he heard the commissioner's explanation. He really couldn't understand why Vincent Reeves had suddenly changed so much compared to their first encounter. However, the opportunity had already been placed in front of him. Regardless of Vincent Reeves's motives, Kevin knew that he had to play his cards right with the Herbalist Society. After all, with the secluded Valley's assassin still going after him, he could use one less enemy at the moment. Speaking of difficulty, didn't the rules of the upcoming round change? In order to get a better result, I plan to refine a medicinal pill that I've never refined before. So in terms of ingredients, Kevin didn't finish his sentence, but he believed that the meaning that he wanted to express was already very clear.
That won't be a problem. The Herbalist Society's internal market has an abundance of medicinal herbs for you to choose from. Later, I will ask Mr. Geller to bring you there to have a look around.
Vincent smiled and gestured toward the old man in blue. Kevin's brows furrowed at the commissioner's efficiency. Before he could even finish his sentence, Vincent had already asked Todd Geller to escort him out of the room immediately. The commissioner's behavior made less and less sense to him, but if he could get the herbs he needed for his medicinal pill for the contest, then dealing with a man of mystery like Vincent Reeves would be all worth it. After recovering in Leo Hayes' cabin, Kevin returned to Herbalist City. He was then immediately brought over to the commissioner, Vincent Reeves, who showed concern for Kevin's condition and offered to help him with anything that he needed for the upcoming round of the competition. Despite being stumped by Vincent's sudden change, Kevin decided that if he played his cards right, he would have one fewer enemy. Upon hearing that Kevin needed ingredients to refine a rare medicinal pill, Vincent asked the old man in blue, Todd Geller, to escort Kevin to the internal market. The Herbalist Society's business was truly huge. Not only were there many branches across the country, but the amount of medicinal herbs that they had accumulated over the years was enormous. As such, the organization's internal trading market allowed interested buyers to expand their horizons by growing their own collection of precious herbs for future use. At the same time, the Herbalist Society was extremely harsh towards outsiders. However, they were good to their own people, especially the young people who represented their hope in the future, and Kevin found himself greeted by traders with eager smiles and promises of great powers within their herbs.
Come and take a look. I just got this century-old heavenly fragrance orchid,
one of the stall owners offered.
Don't miss it when you stop by. That place over there just gave me this yellow turtle grass. If you miss it, there won't be another stall like it in this entire market.
A contestant tipped him.
Does anyone here want to take a look at the ice spirit flower? With this rare flower, you can refine a grade 6 medicinal pill.
Another person yelled as she roamed around. All kinds of shouts could be heard without end. In some ways, the atmosphere at the internal market wasn't much different from a local farmer's market in the city. It was just that the goods sold here in the way of handling things were very different. Moreover, the huge trading market could not be seen with a single glance. The surroundings were filled with stalls selling their own goods, and many of the supposedly rare medicinal herbs that were worth thousands of dollars elsewhere seemed to be very common here. This was, for Kevin, like being the boy let loose in a candy store.
The Herbalist Society's internal market has everything anyone could ever want in terms of variety and quality and quantity. What you're seeing now is just the first level, which is the most chaotic one. While there are many types of medicinal herbs, pills, and pill formulas here, there are very few of them that can truly be considered to be precious items. So don't be deceived by the passionate stall owners or the excited buyers. The quality of the things being sold here isn't quite as good as they say.
The old man in blue, Todd Geller, analyzed the situation here while he accompanied Kevin and walked slowly amongst the crowd. Kevin was glad to have someone beside him who had experienced the market before and could help him to find exactly what he needed without being distracted. "Is there a trading market upstairs too?" Kevin asked while checking out one of the stalls on the side. It was owned by the man who was shouting about the 100-year-old heavenly fragrance orchid that he had recently obtained. However, Kevin could tell with a glance that it wasn't very high quality. It was probably about 10 years old and its petals were beginning to wilt. This proved that Todd Geller wasn't lying to him. Again, Kevin felt lucky that the commissioner had asked Todd Geller to go with him to the market. No one in Chicago would dare to try to trick Kevin into buying something that wasn't of the highest quality, But despite his early success in the competition, there might still be traders who thought they could sell him inferior herbs.
Money is almost useless here. Most of the stalls in the internal trading market use bartering as their preferred method of exchange. As long as you can bring something that they perceive to be of a similar value, then you will be able to get what you want.
Todd faintly glanced at Kevin, who was beside him, and said this with some pride. He added,
"Despite this, there is one more thing that you can rest assured about. This is the Herbalist Society's territory. No matter how mediocre an item's quality here may be, it is still much better than anything you can find outside."
Kevin slightly nodded his head. It seemed that it didn't matter if another organization was able to gain a foothold in herbalism, as the Herbalist Society would definitely remain the firm leader in this sector. Suddenly, a member of the Herbalist Society quickly walked forward and whispered something into Todd's ear. Immediately after, he told Kevin that he had something to deal with, so he followed that person and left. After continuing to walk around the first floor for some time, Kevin had gone through all of the stalls without paying much attention to anything. With that, he then slowly went up to the second floor, his heart beating harder out of curiosity about what he might find there. Compared to the first floor, this place was much quieter. Furthermore, Kevin clearly noticed that the areas here were clearly divided, and the quality of the medicinal herbs, pills, and pill formulas sold here was also much better than the ones earlier. Suddenly, Kevin's eyes locked onto a medicinal herb as he slowly walked over towards it. "May I ask how much this Royal Heart crystal herb is?"
3 grade 5 medicinal pills or 2 grade 5 medicinal pill formulas.
The stall owner sat in a rocking chair, and one of his closed eyes suddenly opened as he shot an extremely cold glance at Kevin. Kevin frowned when he heard this. "Isn't that a little expensive?"
"That's my final price. If you're willing to buy it, then give me what I want for it. Otherwise, get the hell out of here and don't disturb my sleep again."
The middle-aged man stretched lazily. Looking at the Royal Heart crystal herb on the table, Kevin seemed to hesitate. He had already planned out all of the medicinal pills that he would refine later on in the competition, and the Royal Heart crystal herb was one of the most important ingredients that he needed. But compared to the pill formula of a grade 5 medicinal pill, he could get some other items that were worth much more than the Royal Heart crystal herb.
"Mr. Barnes, what good stuff did you decide to bring out today?"
Just as Kevin was hesitating, a voice suddenly sounded. When the stall owner heard this, his eyes immediately opened and he quickly stood up from his chair. Kevin looked over and saw a fiery red-haired man arrogantly walking over with 2 of his subordinates following close behind.
"The items are not bad, especially this 100-year-old Royal Heart crystal herb. Mr. Barnes, it seems that you have quite a lot of good stuff in your hands today."
The man casually picked up the items and inspected them one by one.
"Mr. Grayson, why don't you let me go today and check out another stall? This is the last bit of precious stock that I have to offer."
Larry Barnes quickly walked out from behind his stall and came to the man with a bitter smile as he begged for mercy.
You should feel lucky that I've taken a fancy to your precious items today. Mr. Barnes, you wouldn't be ungrateful, would you?"
Sean Grayson arrogantly shoved Larry Barnes away, almost pushing the thin middle-aged man to the ground. Luckily, Kevin was standing behind him, and thinking quickly, he put out his arms to hold him up. Larry Barnes was obviously used to being bullied. He did not have any courage to resist the man's humiliation.
Then if you like, just take it all."
Kevin clearly noticed that Larry Barnes's fists were clenched tightly when he spoke. His thin and withered body was trembling as well.
"Mr. Barnes, you are still so useless, aren't you? It seems that after being defeated by my father all those years ago, you are still being tormented by it to this day."
Sean raised his head and mocked him with a laugh.
"Anyway, don't blame me for having a good eye for nice things."
Larry Barnes could only bear his insults as he helplessly lowered his head. He then gritted his teeth and didn't dare to make a sound. "I'm sorry, but I took an interest in this item first. I've already discussed the price with this man before you came over here," Kevin remarked coldly with an expressionless face. At first, he didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but he couldn't afford to let this cocky kid get his hands on the Royal Heart crystal herb over him. Moreover, this kid was clearly bullying the stall owner, so he really couldn't stand to not do anything about it for much longer.
Are you simply naive or just plain stupid? Do you actually dare to interfere with our private matter? Who the hell do you think you are? Don't you know who I am?
Sean looked at Kevin from top to bottom as he got right up in his face. His eyes were filled with disdain. You have some bad breath. Didn't your parents ever teach you to brush your teeth? Kevin frowned and retorted coldly as he took a step back. His words immediately attracted the attention of many people. It was obvious that Sean Grayson was known for getting whatever he wanted handed to him without any questions. After all, he had bullied many of these people on a regular basis. Over time, everyone had just gotten used to filling their quota in order to avoid drawing his ire. Therefore, when he bullied Larry Barnes, no one else stood up to say a word to defend him. At the same time, the sudden emergence of Kevin had immediately attracted everyone's attention, but not necessarily for a good reason. In their minds, it was like throwing a huge rock into a pool of calm water, creating endless ripples that would disturb the peace for everyone.
What the hell? Who is this person? I've never seen him before. Why does he want to start a fight with Sean Grayson?
One of the stall owners was in disbelief.
I don't know where this guy came from. He must be blind or just completely ignorant to provoke Sean Grayson. Doesn't he know who he's messing with?
Another shook his head disapprovingly. It seemed everyone in the market knew only a fool would pick a fight with Grayson, and yet Kevin was surely no fool. At the Herbalist Society's market, Kevin saw the Royal Heart crystal herb that he needed for the competition. Before Kevin could make a deal with the trader, Sean Grayson, a bully, rushed over to force the trader to give him the herb for free. However, when Kevin interfered and asserted his intention to buy this item from Larry, Sean turned his anger toward Kevin. Surprised by this, the surrounding people felt that Kevin was going to regret starting a conflict with Sean. Isn't it good to be alive? Why does that kid have to stir up trouble today? Does he think that Sean Grayson would be easy to provoke and get rid of? A large group of people who didn't care about the bigger picture stood in front of their stalls and whispered to each other. Their eyes were all fixed on Kevin at the moment. Who the hell are you? Do you know who this young man is? He's the son of one of the Herbalist Society higher-ups. If you don't want to die, then you'd better get the hell out of here right now. A man beside Sean Grayson stood up and pointed at Kevin, scolding him arrogantly. I'm not afraid to tell you, Sean Grayson is also the top performer of the Herbalist Society's younger generation, and the reason why he had taken an interest in Larry Barnes' items in the first place was because he wanted to refine pills with them and become the champion of the competition. If you know what's good for you, you had better apologize to him and admit your mistake. Then run away as quickly as possible with your tail between your legs. Stop causing trouble here. Kevin could tell that people weren't defending Sean Grayson so much as they were afraid of him and didn't want to get on his bad side. Hearing all of this, Sean raised his head high and revealed a smug look on his face. He couldn't hide the fact that he was clearly enjoying the praise of these people. However, Kevin maintained a very calm expression on his face despite being the subject of the crowd's ridicule. While it would be very hard for others to accept being humiliated in public, Kevin was different. He had long gotten used to this kind of thing, so he was no longer bothered by everybody else's opinions of him. Of course, he also knew that soon they would realize that he was an herbalist himself and had won the first part of the competition, even going so far as to beat Sean Grayson. It didn't surprise Kevin that someone of Sean's ego wouldn't even realize that he was in the presence of the winner of the first stage of the competition. Kevin was, after all, the person who had beaten Sean and all the other contestants. What's the use of revealing every detail of his background? No matter how good he is or how strong his family may be, you're only wasting your breath. After all, it's against the rules to buy and sell here by force. Kevin didn't even look at the two men who were commenting on the events and then said slowly, Besides, No matter what, shouldn't things be handed out on a first-come, first-served basis? Not only did I take an interest in this item first, but I'm the only one who's actually willing to pay the asking price for it.
Are you a child to still think that the world works that way? So what if you took an interest in it first? It's in my hands now. Therefore, this Royal Heart Crystal Herb belongs to me.
Sean Grayson dared him unreasonably.
If you have the ability, why don't you ask the herb who its owner is? Come on, give it a try. As long as it can open its mouth and speak, I will give it to you. Otherwise, you can just get lost.
Kevin's face suddenly turned gloomy when he said that. Sean Grayson was obviously making things difficult for him. Asking a plant to speak? Only God could perform such a miracle.
I'm not afraid to tell you that this entire market is my territory. If you don't do as I say today, I won't hesitate to get someone to break your legs.
A cruel look flashed across Sean Grayson's eyes. He had been intimidating everyone on the second floor of the market for a long time, but this was the first time that someone had come at him so recklessly. Was Kevin challenging his authority? If Sean Grayson tolerated his actions, how could he continue to enforce his will here? Who do you think this item belongs to? Kevin raised his eyebrows and asked the surrounding crowd.
I'm sure everyone agrees that this precious herb is mine, right?
Sean stated while making sure he didn't even look at Kevin, whom Sean viewed as being beneath him. In the entire Herbalist City, and even in Washington, D.C., as long as one heard the name of Sean's father, who would dare to refute him? Now that they were in a similar situation, many of the surrounding people started to shake their heads.
This kid is in big trouble. Did you hear Sean Grayson say that he wants to break his legs?
One of them asked.
Why do you think he's doing this? Why is that kid risking so much for Larry Barnes?
Another questioned Kevin's seemingly ill-advised decision. Larry Barnes, who was standing off to the side, sighed deeply as he watched this tense confrontation unfold. He then tugged Kevin's sleeve and uttered,
"Forget it, young man. You can't beat Sean Grayson. I appreciate your kindness, but just let him have that herb. There are still some other things I have that I can bring for you to have a look at. If you find anything pleasing to your eyes, you can take it for free."
Do you think you can just leave after offending me? Mr. Barnes, instead of thinking about how to help others, you should take care of yourself first. I'll teach you a good lesson after I deal with this kid.
Sean obviously didn't want to let Larry Barnes go so easily. However, at this moment, Kevin suddenly disappeared from where he stood. A second later, he returned to Larry Barnes's side while holding the Royal Heart Crystal Herb in his hand. "Now that this item is in my hands, you'd better get lost," Kevin warned coldly as his spiritual energy began to emit from his body.
Is that a threat?
Sean was burning with anger now that Kevin had made a show of stealing the herb from him. He then immediately gave the order to his two subordinates.
You two, go and teach him a lesson for me. Make sure he doesn't walk out of here under his own power.
After nodding their heads, the two subordinates twisted their wrists and necks, making a series of crackling sounds. A powerful aura then burst out from their bodies, revealing power bases that were at the 5th stage of level 3.
This kid is completely finished. Looks like we all underestimated those two men who have been following behind Sean Grayson wherever he goes.
Someone gasped.
It turns out that Sean Grayson's not the only one who can use his power to intimidate others. That power base of theirs is truly shocking,
another exclaimed.
Who asked that kid to meddle in other people's business anyway? He just dug his own grave,
a third one sneered. As this group of people were discussing amongst themselves, they all felt that Kevin's demise was imminent, and they couldn't wait to witness a good show. We'll see about that. A cold light flashed across Kevin's eyes. Suddenly, an even stronger amount of spiritual energy burst out from his body, causing a powerful pressure to instantly surround Sean Grayson's subordinates.
A level 5 warrior!
One of the subordinates' facial expressions changed dramatically. His right foot, which was about to step forward aggressively, immediately retracted back in a weak manner. "Everyone saw it today. You were the one who brought this upon yourself," Kevin told Sean Grayson in a stern tone. Before he could react to this, Kevin stepped forward and kicked one of his men in the chest. This instantly sent him flying to the other side of the second floor before falling to the ground with a heavy thud. As he curled up into a ball like a child, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. However, Kevin wasn't going to stop until he was satisfied with the outcome. With that, he grabbed the other subordinate by the hair and forced him hard to the ground on his knees. Then, without warning, he used his right hand to punch the man straight in the face. As expected, the man let out a muffled sound of pain as large amounts of blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. The moment he fell to the ground, he immediately fainted. "Your turn." Kevin shifted his attention and stared at Sean Grayson coldly, while he slowly made his way to confront him up close. Only then did Sean come back to his senses, but after stepping back a few steps, he suddenly collapsed on the ground.
What do you want? I'm warning you, you'd better not touch me. Remember, my father is a very powerful person in the Herbalist Society, so if you dare to even touch a single strand of hair on my head, he will never forgive you for it."
Sean was so scared that his face turned pale and his body trembled even more violently. "Huh, weren't you quite arrogant just a few moments ago? You said you wanted to break my legs, right?" Kevin had already walked up to Sean Grayson and was looking down at him.
I was wrong. I'm really sorry. Please don't do anything to me. I have an 80-year-old grandma plus a wife who's pregnant. Please."
Sean pleaded with tears streaming down his face. It didn't surprise Kevin to see that Sean went from being a bully to a baby in such a short amount of time, and he enjoyed watching Sean beg for his mercy.